right, I think we'll get started. Welcome everyone to the 5th iteration of our Youth Preparation Series hosted by NGO CSW New York's cohort of Global Youth Fellows for Gender Equality. The Youth Preparation Series aims to provide a platform for young voices to share experiences and discuss advocacy strategies in the lead up to the much anticipated UN CSW and NGO CSW forum held this March. We're almost there. I will now
almost there.
I will pass it to today's fellows, Lila, Aditi, Shruti, and Congorsal. Take it away.
Thank you so much, Annabelle. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us here today. Before we get into introducing the workshop and what we're going to do, we're just going to start with a brief introduction. My name is Aditi Pariyar. I live and work out of New Delhi, India. I work for a New York-based feminist fund called Women First International Fund that makes small grants to grassroots civil society groups in Southeast Asia and East and West Africa. Very happy to be here, and I'll just pass it on to Hongoro.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Hongorzo, and I am from and based in Mongolia. I am an educator and program coordinator working at an NGO called the Mongol Ecology Center, where I work on environmental education programs with rural youth and rangers in national parks in Mongolia. I'll pass it on to Lila.
Thank you. Welcome, everyone. So happy to see all of you joining us today, whatever time zone you're in. My name is Lila. I'm a current law student and also a founder of the BC Arabic Legal Support Center. I'm currently located in Canada. I grew up here, but have roots to Syria, and I work very frequently with the Syrian and Arab diaspora here in Canada. And so I get to work with a lot of people from my own culture. Sometimes almost feels as if I'm back in my country of origin. I will pass it on to Shruti.
Okay, hello everyone. Good morning, good afternoon from wherever you're joining. Well, I am Shruti Singh, and well, by the way, can you all hear me? All right, great. So just to let you know, I'm part of Fiji Women's Rights Movement, and I'm based in Fiji, by the way. And on top of that, I am a college student, so I may be the youngest, may not be the youngest. Well, we'll see, all right? And by the way, I'm glad to be part of this program and session. And today you'll be having us, you'll be seeing us, you'll be getting to talk more with us, and you will be sharing our experiences. So we hope you enjoy this session and that the outcome will be fruitful, right? Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. So, as Shruti mentioned, the workshop is a thought experiment which aims to foster a discourse on the paradigmic shifts in our collective consciousness here. So through an interactive exploration of affirmative narratives that put policy and governance wins on gender equity at the heart of the discussion today, as well as the advocacy of progressive policy frameworks within our diverse geopolitical context. So this workshop endeavors to shed light on the transformative potential that's inherent in some of the initiatives across Global South at the moment. So by convening all of you, curious citizens, practitioners, young activists, thought leaders here today, our mission is to create an environment that's conducive to learning more about the strategies and policies that catalyze positive social change in our part of the world. So we hope that these inspiring stories shared today have you pleasantly surprised. So without much ado, I'll just hand over the mic to Hongorzo, who will take us through the premise of the exercise.
Okay, thank you, Aditi. So we have a little thought experiment activity prepared for you guys that we hope you enjoy. After I give the instructions, we'll break you out into groups and have you guys discuss, write down your thoughts individually, discuss as groups, and we'll all come back and hear your group's thoughts. So Basically, what we'll do is you will write down what comes to your mind when I tell you the prompt question, and we'll give you about 5 minutes to note down, around 5 to 10 minutes to note down your ideas. And it's okay if you don't know anything about these countries. Please just note down what comes to mind initially. And also please refrain from using Google, since this is not about what you know, but more about just what initially comes to mind when you first hear the names of these countries. So what we'd like for you guys to do is we will give you a Jamboard link that Annabelle has shared, that Annabelle will share in the chat. And what you will do is you'll write down what comes to mind when you hear the names of our following countries: India, Fiji, Mongolia, and Syria. So once you enter the Jamboard, please write down what comes to mind on the left side, and it could be anything. And it would be good to think in the context of gender equity, women's rights, or what you may identify as the biggest challenges to gender equity in these countries. And on the right side, please only list the positive things that comes to your mind in the same amount of time that you took to write down your initial thoughts. So once you're finished, please discuss briefly as a group and assign a reporter from your group that will share your group's general ideas for 1 to 2 minutes once we join back as a larger group. And in total, this should take about 10 to 15 minutes. And the four of us, as well as Annabelle, will check in to different breakout rooms to guide you and see if you guys have any questions. And then we'll join back as a group and hear from every group's reporter. So I think you guys will receive an invitation to join your breakout rooms, so please do so.
All right, all the rooms should be open. Feel free to join the group you've been assigned to.
Also, there's good medical services that are offered. So that was that. And then on Fiji, they talked about access to productive land. Women's poverty is so high. Women are at the risk of abusive behavior. Women are vulnerable to climate change. And some people have not heard about Fiji before. But some also say it's a holiday destination for many. Okay, so when it comes to Mongolia, some people are not sure that women are treated right. And in Mongolia, it's very cold and it's winter time. But also there is disrespect of women land rights. And it's a nice country for sure. And it's really a beautiful country. That's the reflection there. And then the last one, that was Syria. So about Syria, we talked about migration and security issues on the rise. Women are extremely vulnerable. There's oppression of the women. There's a very long war. And for some, when you talk about Syria, it's all about war. So women have limited access and control over land. And there's minimal participation of women in leadership, with issues around food scarcity and limited participation in politics. And there's a heavy burden of care on women that is being shouldered. But there's also diversity of women, but also food insecurity is on the rise. Yeah, that was it. And thank you so much.
Okay, thank you to group 5. How about from group 4?
So I don't want to speak for the group. If there's anybody that would like to go ahead, please do. But I also know that I was a part of group 4, and they did have a lot of technical challenges. You know, people were dropping out, and for some of them, their connection wasn't very secure. So if we could just wait for 30 seconds for somebody to volunteer. If not, I'm happy to do it. No, you go, Aditi. It's okay. All right, thank you. Okay. So unfortunately, the group had a lot of technical gaps, but even then, even so, there were some really beautiful points made. So for India, outside of, going a little outside of the topic, people spoke about how, while they didn't know much about, the state of women and girls in the country, they spoke about how the living situation isn't very conducive for a lot of work. There's extreme heat, there's air pollution, there's poverty. People also said that, in their opinion, there's no gender equity at all, and there's a huge gap between, the middle class and the marginalized people. People also spoke about how women and girls are heavily underrepresented in the country. There's a prevalence of underage marriages. And then, people spoke about festivals, about growing youth awareness, and perhaps some potential for female empowerment programs. And then for Fiji, again, there were people who said they didn't know much. They haven't really heard of anything about the country beyond its name, and potentially think it's a great holiday destination, but with limited infrastructure and limited political and economic presence in the world because it's a small island country. People also spoke about tourism, about potential inaccessibility because of its location. Then for Mongolia, people in the group didn't really know much about the country at all, but they spoke about how women potentially don't travel outside of the country very much, and the fact that the country doesn't really have a lot of political power or influence. And then lastly, with Syria, sadly, there was a lot of congruence, a lot of similarities with the last group. People spoke about how there's zero protection for the citizens, the long war, the fact that women don't work and maybe girls don't really have a lot of educational opportunities. They also spoke about a lot of violence related to the war, that the fact that there's been no peace in a very long time, and how the violence extends to women and children as well. That would be the summary for Group 4. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Now, is there anyone from Group 3?
I guess I can represent Group 3 if that's okay with everyone. So for India, we talked a lot about some of the things that were already mentioned throughout pretty much all of our examples. We said that rape and violence against women were on the negative, as well as climate change and some of the factors that come with climate change, such as access to safety, access to jobs, and agricultural aspects. We also said something around not having access to school and education, as well as access to sexual and reproductive rights and advice and education in that realm. We also said that there's human trafficking due to migration. This was also something similar that we said about, I believe, Syria. And then some of the positives, there's an increase in justice for rape and violence cases. The economy is advancing the inclusion of women. There's an increase of women in leadership positions. There's cooperative growths in regards to work and decent work. There's also an initiative for including more youth and women in schools. And there's also microfinance and loans granted to women. For Fiji, a lot of what I just said about India still applies. Climate change. There's rape and violence against women, loss of land and livelihood due to climate change, gender stereotyping, and then the tourist economy. And some positives we said were a growing number of women in parliament, as well as the microfinance and loans to women, similar to what we said about India. And then Mongolia, sexual harassment still remains high and there's massive inequalities in pay. And then for the positives, the unemployment rate is lower for women than it is for men. Political representation is high and increasing. And there's higher rates of women workers in cities rather than rural areas. And then lastly, Syria, we only got to the negatives for that one, but with the war, seeing the gender impacts of war, as well as religion influencing women's rights. There's also been a pushback by patriarchal society against women's rights, and also with the war, there's the refugee crisis, which has the intersectionalities of gender within it.
Thank you so much. Maybe we can start with group 2.
I know I was a part of that group and there are some really, really great discussions, but I want to give anyone from the group the opportunity to speak before I make some comments.
I think you will be a wonderful representative of Group 2.
Thanks, Christine. So we were very fortunate to have a very positive outlook. And I even honestly learned, and hopefully once we all hear from each other, we can learn even more. But when we discussed India, everyone spoke about how they knew wonderful, wonderful people. Indian culture emphasizes a lot of hospitality, very tech savvy as a country, lots of medical innovation, a very rich culture, a very strong economy, very populated. But I look at these as I guess as opportunities in where we can leverage gender equality and get women as part of the economy and have them have opportunities to showcase their culture and play important roles in society. For Fiji, we didn't know so much. I think there were some kind of assumptions that maybe it wasn't very open to the world, but I think it was reflective of the culture, perhaps. That's a very close-knit culture. We also had a participant comment about how Fiji is part of a lot of global development. I certainly don't know a lot, so I'm looking forward to hearing more. And of course, it's a very beautiful place, very mountainous, wonderful climate, very uniquely situated. For Mongolia, it has a very rich history. One participant says that they see people from Mongolia as being very brave and very loyal people. They protect their young ones. There's a comment that there has been instances or an issue with violence against women. But generally, we're eager to learn more about Mongolia and the issues and opportunities that the country has. And last but not least, Syria, very diverse religiously, culturally, and ethnically, similar to all the other cultures, a lot of hospitality, wonderful people, people that are courageous and strong, of course, given a lot of what's going on in the region. But of course, I think as a country itself, there aren't a lot of land-based resources. And so it makes it difficult in some ways for specific types of economic growth, and also just makes it less important, I guess, sometimes on the global stage for other countries to have, the courage or a reason to, help rebuild the country in any productive way. So those were some of our thoughts. If anyone else in group 2 wants to chime in before we hand it off to group 1. I'm seeing some nodding no, so I think that's it from group 2.
You just did a fabulous job, that's why.
Thanks, Christine.
Yeah, thank you guys so much. So finally, group 1. Is there anyone I was part of that group, but we had also some technical difficulties. So is there anyone who wants to maybe talk about their thoughts? If not, I can also kind of wrap up.
I think we'll let you wrap up, Kunrozi.
Okay. So we weren't able to get too much down on the Jamboard, but overall for India, we said that, you know, the patriarchy is obviously very present, and there's an overpopulation issue. But on the positive end, there's a lot of highly educated people. For Fiji, it was also known as one of the most beautiful holiday resort destinations. That's, I think, a common knowledge, I think, between some participants. For Mongolia, that Mongolia has a small population, which is true. And for Syria, they didn't have a great idea of the country, and so there wasn't much knowledge there, and that's kind of a short wrap up of group one. So thank you to all the groups. I think we had a good mix of different perspectives. Some people don't know much about the country, some people know more, and hopefully at the end of this meeting, you guys will walk away having learned something new, which would be great. So thank you all for participating in this activity. Now I'll hand it over to Shruti to begin our next section with inspirational stories.
Right, so that was some great discussion over there, and I'm glad to be leading up to this session. Right, so before
Shruti, it might not just be me, but your voice sounds like far away.
my voice sounds far away. You can hear
Yeah.
me now?
A little bit
Alright.
better as you brought it closer.
Just the phone is this way. Wait, let me just connect my phone.
Yeah, because it was a lot better
Good
before.
morning here. It's like early morning here.
Okay, better now.
You can understand. All right, great. So to start off with this session, so today I'll be leading off and we'll be discussing of some of the inspirational developments that has been going on in our countries. So to start off, I am from Fiji. And yes, I can see that members fairly know that Fiji is a tropical country. And yes, it is a great tourism and destination site. So if you ever want to come for holidays, you can always consider coming to Fiji. Great beaches, great sandy beaches. You'll get to meet very friendly people. And yeah, it looks all quite positive. And yes, so I just wanted to point out the fact that Fiji is actually a multicultural country and it is very welcoming. So our economy is mostly based on tourism. So that's where we get like most of our income generated from, and agriculture is also one of the factors. So these are just some fun facts I'm letting you in. And you may have heard of Fiji water, right? Yes. As the name suggests, yes, that's where it comes from, Fiji Islands. So I'm pretty sure that's quite popular. And yeah, so just to let you know that Fiji was actually a colony of was colonized by Great Britain during the 1960s era, but then it became a independent country in 1970. So we have been independent since then, and yes, Fiji has been making connections in the global global world. We'll be having connections, and you'll be seeing. I did hear one of the group's discussion that Fiji is actually quite a part of like this developmental plans. For example, in climate change, you'll be seeing our leaders, prime ministers stepping in. And since Fiji is a tropical country with around 1 million population, so it is quite small, I must say. But then there are efforts going in Fiji. So I'll be starting off with the first effort that is being done. So there is this plan called National Action Plan. So it began in 2020. The talks began in 2020, where Fiji embarked on an historic mission to develop a national action plan, which is NAP for short, to prevent violence against women and girls. So makes it the first Pacific Island country and one of the only two countries globally, along with Australia, to have a whole of government and whole of community inclusive, evidence-based approach to prevent violence against women and girls. Right? So the Ministry of Women, Children and Poverty Alleviation, so that's one of our boards, is leading on a series of national consultations across Fiji in partnership with this technical working group, government, civil society, and community stakeholders, including representatives from the, yes, key settings in Fiji to prevent violence against women and girls. So, as I may have said, that it's like many countries, especially Fiji, has been starting to open up to the idea of women and girls, given the authority and power more. And that is a great change because there are many groups such as NGOs, a NGO that I'm part of, Fiji Women's Rights Movement. So these are the major groups around Fiji that go on to bring about advocacy. We do promotions so that people of Fiji know more about it and are more informed. So I must say that Fiji is actually quite on the right track when it comes to having advocacy work and incorporating women and girls into our daily decision making. However, I must say that still there is more growth to be expected. We cannot reach that overnight, can we, right? So we do forecast some more years where we can get more women involved into our decision making skills, but then progress is there, right? So I think that is a great thing. And yeah, so just let me know if I'm going too fast, actually. So I hope that was understandable by far, right? Is there any questions before I move on to my next point? Anyone would like to pop in any question? No. All right, great.
Yes.
Then I'll be, yes?
Yep. Let me ask a question.
Okay.
What country is bordering Fuji?
Sorry?
I mean, what countries are bordering Fuji? What countries are bordering the neighborhood, the neighbor countries in Fuji? What countries are
Okay.
your neighbors? Yeah.
All right. So we have small island nations such as Samoa, Tonga. Then we also have New Zealand and Australia. So those are like the pretty famous countries that I'm pretty sure everyone knows. So yeah, Australia and New Zealand is most likely one of our largest known member countries. I hope that answers your
Thank you.
question.
No, thanks a lot. Yeah, good. Thank you.
All right, welcome. So now I'll be moving on. So remember, I'll be talking more about how there's women and children, cooperation and all these are being more developed in Fiji. So I'll be focusing and touching up on that points, right? Right. So now I'll be moving on. Now there has been an increasing number of women-owned businesses in Fiji. I must say this all started especially during the COVID pandemic, right? So this was something that affected everyone globally. I'm pretty sure we all got to experience that, right? The lockdown and the economic hiatus and all that stuff, right? We all were stripped of that for I say around approximately 2 years or more, right? We all indirectly or directly got to face that. However, I think that was also a growth period for Fiji where people came together at their homes and they got to like become more informed, right? Internet then became something more popular. Social media became more popular as people were home and they got to, lay back and interconnect with the world. And during that phase, I think women I started getting more enlightenment. I must say, I I'd say more enlightenment, right? So there was some progress even before the COVID pandemic. But from my experience, I'd say so there was like more advocacy work where women, because many people were unemployed, right? For Fiji, it's mostly economical wise, it was mostly tourism and agricultural dependent. So when COVID-19 struck in, there was flight restrictions, there were many restrictions in place, right? So the tourism sector was quite badly affected. And then people started coming up with ideas on how they could, earn their livelihoods, make adjustments in how they could, get in money so that they could feed their families. And this is where many women and girls stepped in. So they were given a chance to become more creative, get some ideas in, and help run their families. So through that, many women started having small home businesses where they could have like small bakeries. And yes, handicrafts is also one of the popular craft, like popular thing in Fiji, where women they actually not only women, but many people they actually make bags and handicrafts of coconut leaves, since Fiji is a tropical country and there's an abundance of natural resources such as coconut trees. You'll be getting to see these lush bushes everywhere in Fiji. So people started making use of them. And yeah, so that's where the business aspect comes in. So when people started finding these creative innovations where they could earn their livelihoods, they started implementing. So now I'll be moving on. Women-owned businesses, now they present a substantial yet largely untapped market for financial institutions, as I said. So these micro, small, and medium-sized enterprises in Fiji, according to an assessment, by the way, by the Asian Development Bank, Women's Finance Exchange. So that just shows that there is rapid growth. So there are also commendable credit initiatives that target women. So there is plenty of room for private sector financial institutions to take strategic and gender intelligent approach to serve women entrepreneurs. So yeah, that is one aspect of it. So before I move on to the next point, is there any questions? Was I clear with my point? And did you learn something new, by the way? Yeah, I can see nodding of heads. All right, so that's a great sign. Oh my gosh. So I'll be moving on to my next point. I need to give my other members a chance as well. I don't want to be dragging on this long. All right. So now I'll be touching on to my fourth point. So Fiji's educational sector is actually quite strong. I think Fiji is one of those countries that encourages students and it supports its educational sector and believes in this education sector very strongly. So they want to ensure that the students of Fiji get quality education, they have access to all resources. And by the way, in Fiji, we have like free textbooks from primary school institutes to secondary school, which is still grade 13. So there are free textbooks provided by the government, and there's also incentives going on. So for example, if you're from a lower income earning background, so government has provided incentives such as you can apply for this $200 voucher, back to school voucher, so that parents can have assistance to send their children back to school. So I think that is a great way, right? So that parents don't have to take the full burden of, the financial aspect, and they can send their children off to educational institutions without, any kind of burden on that. And yes, so this has been going on for like around many years, and we also have transport assistance as well, where students, as I've mentioned, they'll just from lower income earning families, they can apply for this voucher, bus card assistance, where the government will provide a funding for them, where students can just like travel through and from public transportation. And I think that is a great way. And it is, I must say, it has helped many people and many students that I've known. And that is just something great.
where people, as I mentioned, don't get to face like this financial burdens, right? So yeah, that was one of the point. And education and all this, there's a lot of advocacy going on around it. Students are provided many opportunities. They're being aware. As many people use social media, so yes, Fiji is becoming advanced in quite many aspects. So yes, we're just adapting to all that. Now, I'll be moving on to my I don't know how many points. I didn't count that. I lost track of it. So, right, coming into women and girls. So, this couple of years, for the past decade, we've been trying to improve on the financial, social standing of women and girls in our society. And for that, schools have taken initiatives. I mean, our ministries have taken initiatives to help young girls and women that go to school. For example, we have rural areas in Fiji where they do not have access to pads, right? Pads and central, even in urban areas. So, as I had said, Fiji is like a low to middle income country, and in country, a developing country, I must say. And to assist students, especially girls, who cannot afford sanitary means due to money constraints, there has been also incentives going around where students, girls, can receive this voucher they can receive sanitary pad vouchers from the ministry. So this will be distributed yearly. So girls can actually redeem these vouchers at their local supermarkets. So they can basically buy of sanitary pads at a much lower price than the usual. For example, there's a limit given. So there's $3 per voucher. So you can buy a pad worth $3, and that is 12 times for year round. So I think that's a great incentive given to girls, young girls especially. And so we also have advocacy groups that go around in schools promoting about menstrual hygiene and ways so that girls can have better access and better knowledge to that. And that is something great, I must say. And yes, moving on to my last point. So there are many non-government organizations that are popping up, right? So I'm also part of this NGO called Fiji Women's Rights Movement I did mention earlier. So these kinds of organizations actually help, I must say, help people around in Fiji country as we take initiative to go around, do advocacy work. We're not solely depending on our government, right? We as people of Fiji take pride, civic pride, I must say, and we want to ensure that people in Fiji get, try and develop in many ways. So we have NGOs that pop in, share in information. So I'm part of this NGO for like the past decade or so, since I was a young girl. And we get access to information, we get to know about human rights, gender equality, and all these untapped topics that not many people get to know. We get trained, we get facilitated, and then we get to share that back to our community. So I think that is such a wonderful aspect, don't you think? That there are many NGOs popping in and they get to share in and all that. So yes, I think that wraps and sums up about what I have to say. So I hope you all have learned a thing or two about Fiji today, and not that it's only a tropical country, but yes, it's a nation with many possibilities, many chances. So yeah, I think I took in quite some time. So now I'd like to hand it over to Aditi. But before that, if there's any questions, you can pop it in the chat box and I'll try to reply to them. All right? Thank you so much for listening to me.
Thank you so much, Shruti. That was so comprehensive. I have to say, I learned a lot of things about Fiji today as well. In the interest of time, I'm going to keep this short. As you know, I will be speaking about India. And before I get into the success story, so to speak, I'd also like to say that um, I completely respect almost and agree with almost every single thing that was said about India across the five group interactions. So what we're trying to do is not to change your opinion or say that, you know, your beliefs about our home countries are necessarily wrong or unfounded, but to also say that while there are maybe seven things wrong with the country, there are three sprouts of hope. There are things that are changing. There are efforts that are underway to change things. If they haven't changed today, there's hope that things may look differently on a webinar 10 years from now. So I've shortlisted a couple of relevant events, policy level changes, some governance related developments that have taken place in the country in the past 10 to 15 years. The first one being my favorite, which is the Beti Bachao, Beti Padhao initiative, which directly translates to save the girl child, educate the girl child. This was launched to prevent gender-based sex selective elimination. I'm not sure if we're all familiar, but the northern parts of India have had a very high rate of femicide, killing of girl children right after they're born, because they're considered a burden in the patriarchal Indian society. But with the help of this campaign, which was largely advocacy based and had an intervention at some very, very rural last mile areas in the country, the program registered great success in improving the sex ratio in India. It saved over 52,000 girls from being killed at birth since its launch in 2015 across 4 states of northern India. It's actually been the only successful program that has helped curb the high number of feminicide cases in the country. So on education, I'd like to talk about the annual status of education report, the ASER report that's published every year, which talks about the gender gap in education. And in the last 5 years, the primary and secondary education enrollment in India has actually tilted in the favor of girls in government schools across the country. More than 800,000 new girls enrolled in the year 2022 in free primary education schools across India. Girls and women today also constitute a 43% of the total number of graduates in the country in STEM courses, which is science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. In political representation, 2023, the last year, saw two very important events. The first was the passing of the Women's Reservation Bill and an increase in women's participation in assembly elections, which are the government elections that happen every 4 years in India. So not only are more women showing up to vote, they're also playing a very big role in deciding which political party in India gets supported. The gender gap among Indian voters is also narrowing, with the participation of women set to constitute half of the turnout in the 2024 elections. And in the 2029 general body elections, women are supposed to make up 72% of the total voter base. In 2020, the Supreme Court of India also ruled that female officers should be granted permanent commission and command positions in the Indian Army on par with their male counterparts, which was not the case before 2020. So this decision marks a major milestone in gender equality within the armed forces, opening up more opportunities for women to serve in leadership roles in the Indian Army for the first time ever. Some of you may be familiar with the fact that, unlike popular opinion that India is a Hindu country, we also have a very large Muslim population. And in 2019, the Indian Parliament passed the Muslim Women Act, which was the Protection of Rights to Marriage Act, which criminalized the practice of instant triple talaq being the Indian word, the Urdu word rather, for divorce. So historically, a man could say talaq, talaq, talaq. So the word divorce thrice to his wife in the presence of a religious leader, and they had the right to grant divorce to their wives. But this legislation that took place, that was passed in 2019, was seen as a victory for gender equality and women's rights, as provides it provides legal protection to Muslim women in the country, against arbitrary divorce and financial insecurity. So it gives them and their children the ability to actually pursue higher court and challenge this decision of divorce by their husbands. Another great thing that was passed in 2017 was the Maternity Benefit Amendment Act. This was an amendment to the existing Maternity Act, which extended the duration of paid maternity leave for women working in the formal sector from 12 weeks to 26 weeks. This was also to encourage and promote women's workforce participation, to improve maternal and child health outcomes, and to also support working mothers in balancing their professional responsibilities along with their caregiving responsibilities. The last thing that I'd like to talk about is the STEP program. The STEP, or the Support to Training and Employment Program for Women, is a flagship program by the Ministry of Women and Child Development, which is aimed at enhancing the employability of women by providing them vocational training, skill-based training in areas of their interest. So this program mostly focuses on high female workforce participation in industries that have always been a very big contributor of income for women in India, such as textiles, handicrafts, food processing. Our finance minister, who also happens to be a woman, Nirmala Sitharaman, said that the government has extended a 43 crore loan amounting to 22 lakh crores. That's in Indian money, under the Prime Minister's Mudra scheme. And of this loan giving scheme, about 70% loans have been given to female entrepreneurs. So all in all, the last 10 to 15 years have seen a lot of development, a lot of small but consistent wins for women and girls in the country. And the hope is that the organizations, the ones that Shruti mentioned, civil society organizations in India, are putting their hands together to ensure that we keep this going. In the interest of time, I would also like to pass this on to Hongorzo, who can then, pass it on to Laila, and then we can take some questions. In the meantime, like Shruti said, I'd be happy to answer questions in the chat. So over to you, Hongorzo. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Aditi. Yeah, I'll just go right in. I think I expected most people to not know much about Mongolia, so I think I'll start with a little bit of context of my country. So we're located basically exactly sandwiched between China and Russia. So between two large countries, and we 40% of our population rely fully or partially on nomadic pastoralism. So there's nomadic herding is prevalent across the country, in rural areas especially. And there's a distinct rural and urban divide across basically all sectors that leave the rural populations, especially youth, with less access to opportunities, because basically all opportunities, NGOs, civil society, and other organizations are based in the capital city. And outside of the capital city, there's just smaller towns. There's no large cities. So all towns are very spread out, and there's many small towns with only a population of 2,000 to 3,000 people. So in those towns, there's the middle school and high school, and essentially not much more for youth, especially to kind of develop themselves. They would have to either move to the capital city or engage in different opportunities online, which have been increasing in the past few years. But generally, there's a very, very distinct rural and urban divide. And one of, I guess, the unique aspects of Mongolia is that there's a reverse gender gap. So basically at every level of education, there's more males attending than there's more females attending than males. And the professional workforce consists of more women than men. And so there's kind of like an inverse education gap. Though in high levels of political office, especially, and just general management and levels of decision making, men still are prominent. So in all levels of education, more females are educated, but at still decision making level, there's more men in control, basically. So and even though women make up more of the professional workforce, there's still a gender gap where women are paid less. So those issues are still prevalent in Mongolia. And especially in rural areas, males or young boys living in rural areas, they're more vulnerable to dropping out of school, especially because of family requirements. So if this applies mostly to herding families or nomadic families, where they would keep their sons at home after either they graduate middle school or high school to continue herding their animals instead of sending them off to higher education or university in the capital city, which they do with their daughters. So if a family had a son and a daughter, most likely they would keep the son at home after high school to continue herding the animals, and they would send their daughter off to get a higher education to the city or to basically to the city. So in rural areas especially, young boys are more likely to drop out, and this causes a range of problems from obviously wealth disparities. There's also a high rate of alcoholism among men, and this also is related to increased violence and domestic abuse. And that's kind of the context. You guys can, hopefully you guys will be inclined to research more about Mongolia and the other countries after this session today. But I'm going to share with you some examples and kind of success stories of different NGO initiatives and NGOs work in Mongolia. Basically in Mongolia, civil society and NGOs do a lot of the work. So it's not the NGOs kind of relying on government policy or their actions to develop their work, but the opposite. The NGOs do the work, and the government and ministries kind of latch on, sometimes in negative ways. But yeah, the civil society, especially NGOs, are very well developed, I'd say, in Mongolia, and their majority are youth-led. So a lot of the leaders, directors are around, 30, 40 years old, a lot of women-led NGOs, and there's a lot of exciting, innovative new programs that NGOs in Mongolia are implementing, which is exciting. So I want to start off with the example of actually the work that the NGO that I work at does. So I work at an NGO called the Mongol Ecology Center, and we implement different environmental education and other conservation-related programs for rural youth and also rangers of national parks in Mongolia. And this ranges from junior ranger camps for middle school students from the small towns to a program called the Youth Sustainability Corps, which targets high school students from all over the country to engage in different activities, from speaking at summits to submitting their project proposals, so ecopreneurship project ideas, and also internships and exchanges within the country. And while our main target or our main focus is to increase environmental education and knowledge around sustainability among these youth, basically in every aspect of our program, and this is not only for our NGO, but basically all NGOs in Mongolia, you'll notice there's about, for every 10 applicants, maybe 8 are girls and 2 are boys or young males. And so you notice that there's definitely a lack of involvement from young men and across all types of programs, but we haven't figured out the solution to this, but at every stage of our application process, when we reach out to schools, we're starting to kind of incorporate how we can involve more young boys in our programs, and especially in our rural youth programs. So for students in middle school, so aged around 10 to 14, we try to always keep our program participants 50% women, 50% young boys. It always doesn't work, but we're always trying to increase the involvement of young boys in our programs. So for the next example, I want to talk about this NGO called Women for Change, and also the Women's Leadership Network. So Women for Change is basically the leading gender-focused NGO in Mongolia, and they were founded 14 years ago by 4 Mongolian women who basically were just all passionate about gender equality, human rights, and democracy. And now they are the leading NGO implementing programs like the Young Feminist Leadership Program, kind of advocating for policy change, and also they've recently started working on spreading widespread knowledge about the care economy. So and one of their kind of traits is that if they're able to kind of what's the word, take like knowledge from the international scene and translate that, not only translate, but bring that knowledge so that it's understandable and it reaches the Mongolian audience. And so kind of the turnover rate, I guess, or the turnover from the international knowledge to bringing that knowledge to Mongolia and sharing it with the population is very fast. So just like over a month ago, they attended a care economy conference, and since then they've been kind of leading campaigns and different activities within the care economy. So that's one of the aspects of NGOs in Mongolia, is that they're able to kind of transform information very fast to reach the Mongolian audience. And the Women's Leadership Network, it's a nationwide grassroots movement network with over 2,000 members, and this was initiated by the UNDP and also the Korean International Cooperation Agency. And basically they were targeting women in rural areas and targeting women in rural areas to increase their involvement in local politics. So because, like I said before, the small towns across Mongolia are very far apart, there's very far apart, and especially in rural areas, it's the patriarchy or the male-dominated culture is much stronger, and so especially in politics, there's not many women involved, especially at the lowest level of politics, so at the small town level. And through this women's leadership network, they basically have built like a network of women involved in politics at that local level, and they essentially empower each other to be involved in local politics, exchange of advice and knowledge, because the exchange of kind of experiences among women at between different rural towns is very little, because of physical distance, it's just so far apart. And even though everyone is active on Facebook or connected on social media, there's no like network or kind of gathering space for them to discuss, especially about specific issues like political involvement. So this network is kind of like the first of its kind among in this field. Another initiative, so this is the last 2 initiatives I'll talk about. One is called Dandelion, and this is focused more in the capital city, but I imagine that they would have plans to expand across the country once, yeah, So Dandelion is basically dedicated to improving access to comprehensive sexual and reproductive health, as well as reliable information to girls and women of the reproductive age in the capital city. So it's kind of like a mobile bus, and they drive around the outskirts of the capital city in the less developed areas to provide this information to girls and women. And the significance of having a mobile kind of format is that within the city, in the outskirts, they're able to reach, more isolated areas because there aren't many like community centers or those types of infrastructure in Mongolia. So a mobile form of any kind of initiative or project is kind of like the ideal way to reach especially underserved populations. And this could also be a model that could be replicated in rural areas as well, where they could travel around the different small towns. And especially with this initiative, they partnered with other organizations. So another initiative called Imbatloi, which is also targeted towards improving maternity care, Clinica, which is a medical startup app, and another NGO working in urban development. So these kind of initiatives also work to bring different stakeholders together to work towards obviously one goal, which is also one thing that's lacking within kind of the civil society space in Mongolia is every NGO is kind of doing their own thing, but obviously if they work together, there would be much more of an impact. So they're kind of like a model of how these kind of initiatives can bring different organizations together as well. And the last initiative I wanted to talk about is the Gear Kitchen. So some of you may have heard of yurts. It's like a white felt tent. And so it's called ger in Mongolia, G-E-R. And that's kind of the traditional dwelling or housing in Mongolia, which a lot of people still use in rural areas and in the outskirts of the city. And that's the name of the initiative, Gear Kitchen Initiative. So they are a local value chain approach in employment opportunity and food security aimed at women in rural areas. So they mobilized around 120 women in 6 small towns across the country in different provinces to establish small dairy processing units with a certain capacity. So in rural areas, a lot of the small businesses run by women are based on selling dairy products. So like cow milk, sour cream, clotted cream, yogurt, etc. And a lot of them are just small kind of household level businesses, I guess you would say. So this initiative kind of takes that to the next level and helps make it a more official business and increases the capacity of those women to be able for them to increase their production. And a lot of the times it doesn't take much. It's all about it could just be even like providing them with large containers that can hold a large amount of milk, which they lack in their obviously small house. So, and then they connect these women and these small businesses to local schools, so that these dairy products can be provided for the schools and kindergartens for like the midday snack or their lunch meals. So the kids can benefit from, healthy, fresh dairy and food, while it also supports the local women working in the dairy industry. So these are kind of a range of different NGOs, their work and examples within Mongolia. And generally, it's really exciting to see the trend, I guess, of growing programs targeting especially rural populations because 5 or even 10 years ago, if you looked at the different work of NGOs and civil society, all of it was pretty much focused on populations in the capital city and did not make an effort or did not reach out to rural populations. But now everyone is kind of understanding that you have to include and reach out to rural areas, even though they may be far, it may take extra funding, but it's just it's kind of becoming a non-negotiable now, which is really great. So yeah, if you guys have any questions, comments, of course, please leave them in the chat, and I'll hand it off to Lila.
Thank you, Congorzal. That was, yeah, fantastic. I'll probably take a few minutes kind of to speak about Syria, and then we can wrap up, have a brief summary, and then open up to any general questions you might have before we wrap up this beautiful meeting. Thank you for everyone who's still here with us. I see still a lot of participants, so thank you for bearing with us and for hearing our experiences. So of course, I'm from Syria. I actually have never lived there, but I have a strong connection. I used to visit every summer, or every other summer. Still have my grandparents there, and hear from them frequently about what's going on. Unfortunately, I've had family who has left the country and gone to other countries, whether in Europe or in Turkey. And of course, sadly, as many of you have already mentioned, it's a place where there's certainly war, destruction, devastation, unfortunately, but there is a lot of hope for the country. Of course, the Syrian revolution or the uprising began in 2011. And of course, as we see as a trend across many countries, particularly in the global south, when there's no effective means to hold the people in power accountable, where there's no means for justice, for democracy, then people, of course, uprise, and it frequently, sadly, leads to violence. Frequently, those oppressive governments and dictatorships are supported by other foreign powers that enables them to stay in power. But I think what was really interesting and inspiring is that women were generally at the forefront of the revolution, getting out there, protesting, and even until now, they are breaking barriers both within the region and in the Syrian diaspora globally. And it's given me a lot of inspiration from the young women and individuals and allies from the Syrian community that I've met. I'm going to share my screen, maybe make this a little bit more interactive. Let me see. I'm going to share the correct screen. So give it a moment. So my partner, actually, he works and volunteers with Mulham Team, which is currently has offices and works in Turkey as well as Northwest Syria. And they do a number of wonderful projects that have had a significant impact on.
Oh, Lila, I think, is it just me? I can only see like the top tabs of your screen.
Oh, okay.
Not the full screen.
Yeah, I can't see
Thank
your
you for
screen
pointing
either.
it out. Let me see if I click on something, if it shows up now. Let me try sharing again. Yeah, I think this should work. Hope so.
Okay, now you can
Yes.
see.
Okay, perfect. So they do a lot of different campaigns, mainly educational. The other thing that I was trying to show you shows all their campaigns. Some of them are shelter, some of them are education. And they work primarily in northwestern Syria to ensure that the next generation of youth don't miss out on schooling, on safe housing. The vast majority of Syrian refugees live, sadly, in tents. They've been displaced or in very precarious housing. And so they're doing a lot of work globally to fundraise and then locally to connect with people, to employ people locally to help build actual buildings. I want to try to see if I can find one very, very important campaign. See, they're constructing mosques because they know the importance of building community centers and things that can bring people together. But I'm trying to see if I can find until the last time. That is their most Yeah, I don't think it's going to pop up because I need to go back to the other screen. But anyways, I guess what the takeaway that I hope that you can take from this is that there is hope, that there are people who are rebuilding, and women at the forefront. And I think also part of the revolution and displacement has also contributed to challenging a lot of the gender norms that are and continue to be prevalent in general mainstream Syrian society. It's like women staying at home, usually many women actually in Syria are educated, but they don't end up working, particularly after getting married. And a lot of that was challenged after they were displaced. And some households are actually woman-led households, like they are the breadwinners for the household sometimes. So there's been a lot of change and a lot of shift and a lot of momentum from young Syrians who are trying to drive the change and trying to keep and support and empower young people and see them in kind of spaces that uplift them. And the Syrian diaspora is very large, half of the population. Like there was 20 million people, if we're considering around 2010. It is supposed that at least half of those people are outside of the Syrian borders. And so that's a significant number. We're talking about 10 million people, 10 million Syrians outside of their homeland. And so they're making impact everywhere that they go. And I do know many who have now taken on positions in refugee seat and all over the world, making impact and trying to give refugees specifically spaces and a place in decision-making spaces. And I guess finally, to kind of wrap up, because I don't want to take a much longer, there's a local actually organization that I want to highlight that specifically empowers Syrian newcomers, but also newcomers of all backgrounds. Initially, when there was the Syrian refugee crisis and a lot of countries were taking in Syrian refugees, there were a lot of organizations that were supporting them. And amongst them was the Syrian Canadian Foundation, and they've run a lot of wonderful community events that empower immigrant women and trying to give them safe spaces, a youth in skilled trade program. And I think my favorite one is Women in Civic Engagement, so inspiring immigrant women to get engaged in politics, because I think that it's so important. And on a personal level, I do a lot of public legal education in the legal sector, so helping newcomers, a lot of them Syrian, navigate the legal system and understand their rights. I think there's always a huge gap in people understanding their legal rights. The law is intentionally made very difficult to understand. So I enjoy in my free time supporting and explaining to newcomers in Arabic and in English how to navigate the legal system in a way that supports them and helps them with whatever issues come up. So that's a little bit about kind of Syria and what Syrians are up to, both within Syria and the diaspora in Canada and what we're up to. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. I guess as a very brief summary, I know all of us have, as speakers, have highlighted our personal experiences in our countries and our communities, and there's a lot of really important work going on. And I think despite what we may see on television or on social media, or even in outdated books and articles, there's a lot of really important work that's going on within our communities to empower our people, but also the hope that we can inspire other communities and other people in other countries to dream big and think big. And I think this activity was super interesting in showing how people thought about these regions and these countries, but then also getting to see what's being done to address some of the issues that have been raised or highlighted. And even if there are certain stereotypes, there are in all of our communities, whether you're in Syria or you're in North America or India, Fiji, Mongolia, all over around the world, we have issues in our communities, and we're all hopefully in some way trying to address and make our communities a lot better. So thank you all of you for participating. I'm going to open up to Q&A for any of us. All four of us will stick around if you have any questions. feel free to, I guess, raise your hand or drop your question in the chat.
Any questions for our Global Youth Fellows before we close out today? Going once, going twice.
Go
Go
good
ahead.
day,
Anne.
good evening, good afternoon from others, but I'm here in South Africa. It's Anilisa. I just want to say thank you very much from all the speakers that have just did their presentations with regards to their own country. And I'm very much impressed with each and everyone's success stories. And most especially the fact that it is the women that are filling in the gap. And I've noticed that the one thing that is common is that we need these strong standing civil societies to actually see to it that the frameworks and policies to address our social ills, in order for them to be implemented, they need the civil societies actually, because the common factor was the fact that our women within the political sector, they don't have a voice. I think more than anything else, that is the most thing that I've taken. And the fact that they don't have a political voice, it then means whatever that is printed in the legislature, in the framework, it won't be implemented if we do not have these civil societies that are led by the youth, that are led by the women in addressing the women challenges that we're facing. And again, to the speaker of Fiji, yes, there was a voucher of $200 that they say they give to the young girls. And she said it's given to the less fortunate families so that the children will not drop out of school. And I just wanted to compare maybe from what we have in South Africa as a child support grant, right? So I just wanted to know that it's only given to those families that cannot afford to take their children to school, or it's given to the less fortunate households. I just wanted a clarity on that. Thank you so much, ladies.
Okay, thank you for the question. So just wanted to know that the $200, I'm sorry, that you're talking about the $200 voucher, right? Or the paired incentive?
Yes, Shruti, yes, that's the one.
Yeah, you're talking about the $200 voucher one. So yes, just to touch up on that, that voucher thing is given to people who have applied for that. For example, they'll have to provide like their household income. For example, if they earn below 30,000 per annum. So they'll be students can collect the forms from their office. The schools will be providing it, and they can fill it in, provide details and more information, get it signed by the JP, and provide their pay slip and just certification and all. Then the government will certify all that, and according to that, people who qualify will be given the $200 voucher. So it is quite a process, but then it's just to ensure that the funds go to people who rightfully deserve it. And as for the pets voucher thing, so this is actually given to all and every girl. Yes, so mostly in schools they'll check with the high schools, especially they'll check with the girls, and they'll be provided this voucher. So every girl will receive it, not only the less fortunate one, but yeah, everyone will receive it. I hope that answers your question.
Yes, thank you so much. So basically, in South Africa, we have a child support grant. So I think it's more or less the same. That's the same. Thank you.
Oh, that's wonderful to hear. Thank you for sharing.
I think we could take one more question.
I have a question. So,
fellows, you can decide.
Go ahead, Jilsat.
yeah, hi, Lila. So, I applaud all the speakers today. I've learned a lot, and I really am encouraged that as young as you are already starting a grounds for the upcoming children. You know, the world, of course, are getting older, but coming from a different perspective, you guys, I salute all of you because I have children of my own. And seeing this, I hope that all the kids, all us parents, and being involved on this and supporting you guys is a very promising future, right? And because if we go back to history, women were second-class citizens. It was only the 21st century that there was this women's liberation, the right to education, the right to political power and positions, right? So I would like you to continue this. I'm getting a question because we should develop this kind of awareness, not only here, but when you go to the UN, that all nations must do this. I mean, that's my own suggestion that every country should have women like you guys to promote this. And I salute all of you and I thank you.
Christine, I see your hand is up.
Thank you.
Go ahead. Thank you, Julie, so much for your kind words.
Thank you. I am absolutely impressed with passion. Each of you that expressed on your reports, you just reeled me in because we don't really know that. It's not in the media. They don't talk about that, and it's needed, especially these countries. And what's interesting enough, I looked up on the website and saw some of your pictures on it and your age. Oh my gosh, you guys are, as the other person mentioned, you're the generational kickoff with new future starting now today. I want to know if I can still belong. I'm 65. I have to my grandkids. I got grandkids your age and a great grandson. But you just speak to my heart, and it's just thank you. I cannot say enough. Thank you. But am I allowed to come back because I'm a little older, just a tiny bit older? But is that okay?
Of course, of course. Thank you for your kind words, Christine. Oh my goodness. There's no age for community development and the amazing work we're doing. You're doing really amazing work too, Christine. And you're reaching a demographic that you don't reach.
Well, you got
Christine and I will volunteers.
Yeah.
Christine will be volunteers, Christine, for them to support the youth.
Yeah, we got our pom-poms. We'll have cheers if you need it.
Me too.
Be on the front line. Yeah, I can get carried beyond. But thank you.
I'll connect with you, Christine.
Fellows, do you want to round us out today?
Yeah, we'll just have to support you guys. Continue doing this. I love it because I have children your age. And women too, 3 women.
Thank you all. An amazing job, fellows. We are at 3 p.m. So we'll wrap it up here. This was recorded, so we'll be sharing it with all of you. But thank you again to our 4 amazing fellows for all of your really impassioned work today. All right.
Thanks so much, everyone.
Thanks, Annabelle.
Thank
Everybody
you,
can unmute and say
See
goodbye.
you next time. See you next
Bye.
time.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone.